today's episode of the why?
Sorry, just keeping you on your toes.
On today's episode of the Unwritten Rule, I'm leaving that in, Peyton. You have no say in the matter. On today's episode of the Unwritten Rule,
Sounds good to me.
I don't know what happened. We're going to talk about the football game that we all just watched. We're recording on Saturday. Mizzou won. They're keeping the New Year's 6 Bowl alive. We're going to talk all about it, recap the game. I still don't really know how to process it even after we took a minute before we started this. But yeah, we're going to talk all about the game and all about Mizzou's win. But first things first, quick word from the sponsor, Bet Online. The last of the major pro sports leagues is off and rolling, and college basketball is ready to go as well. Bet Online remains your top spot for all your live betting action and contests. NFL, college football, UFC, and NHL are all in full swing, and Bet Online is your number one source for wagering news, odds, trends, and predictions. Sicko football hit again. We'll talk about that on Sunday. All of the hoops betting action along with every sport available right at your fingertips with both desktop and mobile access at any time. So head to Bet Online today and remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, BLEAV, BELIEVE for your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Bet Online, where the game starts, and the Unwritten Rule After Dark edition starts right now.
Marcel, where are you going with that disc? You are not putting that on again. Marcel, okay, if you press that button, you are in very, very big trouble.
Attention. Everybody stop what you're doing. It's time for The Unwritten Rule, a Mizzou sports podcast brought to you by the Believe Network, alongside Peyton Haverman and Kenny Van Doren. Here is your host, Jack Knowlton.
Welcome back to the Unwritten Rule. Today is Saturday, almost Sunday, November 18th. And Mizzou football's New Year's 6 hopes are not dead. I believe you me, I was watching the entire fourth quarter of this 33-31 win for the Tigers over Florida, getting ready to make the intro to say literally the opposite and say that the New Year's 6 bowl game hopes were dead, but they're not dead. Thanks to a Harrison Mevis field goal and a game-winning drive in a game that, to me, Missouri, it felt like had no business pulling out, but they did somehow. 33-31, Brady Cook hits Luther Burden on a 4th and 17. They run 2 more plays to give Harrison Mevis a 30-yard field goal, which he promptly drills. A lot easier than his 30 or 61-yarder, that he hit against Kansas State to win that game. I was losing my mind. I texted one person, I believe, the words, "I'm going to puke," during this game, running around my house, just talking to myself, freaking out, going through all of the emotions. Kenny and Peyton, I'm sure you two were as well. We're not going to bury the lead here, boys. We're journalists. What an ending to a wild game.
But yeah, my God, Mizzou could not have played a much worse game for a large stretch. I mean, the defense especially, and you got to keep it in perspective a little bit because Florida is a very good offense. They came into this game, I mean, averaging a decent amount of points. Graham Mertz, for all of his faults, and you certainly saw it, he has some wild moments where he just overthrows. He's been he leads the country in completion percentage, and he was largely okay for a large part of the game. But even then, I mean, Mizzou, they made the most of when they got one turnover, the 1 second half turnover. And your defense just, I mean, the way you look at it is your defense just played probably its second worst game of the year. And it was pretty on par with the LSU performance. It was not a good night for them. And you were still able to pull out a win against a team that, yes, they have not had the season they were hoping for in Florida. They were absolutely desperate to get that win tonight. They have Florida State next week, and they're going in 5-6 now. And yes, Florida State no longer has Jordan Travis, but they didn't know that at the time. They threw everything at the wall to beat Mizzou, even when their backup QB came in, made a few plays for them. It really felt like Florida was a more desperate team, and it felt like they were going to win that game. But Brady Cook, man, can't say enough. I know Kenny and I had a very similar take on what that last drive for him felt like. just been a magical year, and that was a magical moment.
Yeah, you say Florida's offense, has been good. Florida's defense has not, and that was a big part that kept getting brought up on the broadcast. You look at these last couple games: South Carolina 39 points, Georgia 43, Arkansas 39, LSU 52. This defense was just giving up everything, and they did a good job holding Missouri early on, and working against them and showing a defense that hasn't really been on the field at all this year, like they had today in Columbia. And that thought, that Peyton and I both had is that last drive for Brady, he put that Florida defense back to what it looked like the rest of the season. I mean, he found holes. The offense did everything. The wide receivers were great. Mookie, Mackay, Luther, everyone found spacing. And what that felt like wasn't just redemption for like any mistakes in that game. It almost felt like redemption for the Georgia game in 2022. And that's where we kind of both had the exact same thought of he couldn't get it done then. And we've talked about it at length this year that Brady Cook is not just a better quarterback. He has so much more swagger, confidence in himself, and he's pulling this stuff off. Look at the photo that Missouri Football posted of him standing in front of the student section. This guy's got it. And I mean, he's going to be the quarterback for Missouri next year as well. We know that. I mean, he has everything's on him right now. And I mean, if you look at the start of the season, and he was saying, I want people to want me to be the starting quarterback. I mean, he has every right to be the starting quarterback moving forward too.
And the Georgia thing, it started the exact same way. If you don't know the drive we're talking about, it was the last drive Mizzou's offense wound up having when Georgia had just taken the lead in 2021. Brady Cook comes out, throws, let's call it what it is. 4 awful balls, just not anywhere close to any receiver. It was just he sank like when the pressure was on, and that's okay. Like we can say that now because at the beginning it really did look like this was going to be a similar drive. You can't be throwing checkdowns to Cody Schrader that are losing 2 yards or gaining 2 yards and burning 10 seconds off the clock. You cannot 50-50 balls on a 2-minute drill are not good. Like you can't do that. You have to find holes. You have to make a play. But you know what? That 4th and 18, that's just where Mizzou has really turned. It encapsulates everything the season has been. When even in Mizzou's worst moments, they find a way to make a play. They find a way to gut out a win. Kenny mentioned it. 2 more money throws to Mackay. That throw to Mookie on the sideline was a very nice ball.
Yeah.
And Brady Cook, he found the redemption there today. I mean, redemption for not just Georgia, but like Kenny said, just kind of all that doubt that everybody had, maybe even reasonably at the beginning of the year.
I had this thought I had this thought I would almost advise any college team, big time college team, that to get your quarterback, to be a guy that grew up rooting for them the whole time for his whole childhood, because that man played his ass off and you could tell just did not want to lose, was not going to let his team lose. I was thinking about the Drinkwitz quote where he's like, we've been in some dark places, the stuff he was saying about that. And they played their asses off. They played until, the final whistle on 4th and 17 when all hope seemed lost. He made a play, and Peyton's right. Good teams find a way to pull out wins in games like this. And it felt like Mizzou was going to Mizzou at times. They had that crazy drive, which I'm sure we'll touch more on, where they scored twice again. And both those plays were negated. But they found a way. He put himself in a perfect position. Even again, when we had some more weird ass clock management from Drinkwitz, where they called the timeout after an incompletion to kind of settle things down, ended up paying off, and they still got their field goal team on, no problem. Kicked the game winning kick. But I think you guys are spot on there. There is no doubt left to have in Brady Cook. I mean, he wants this so bad, and this was a game that you could tell, that was the case.
You look at the numbers, 20 for 34, 331, and I don't think anyone would even say this is his best game of the year. I mean, that's just the improvement he has really shown this season. And he started rough. I mean, it was 2 for 7. He was under pressure a lot, to his credit. But I mean, then he started just making money throws. I totally forget the exact moment it happened, but that ball where he's rolling out to his left, he's like got an old lineman being pushed back into him. He just throws a like just a perfect rainbow, like right into the breadbasket of Luther. Luther just shakes off a couple dudes. Um, it's been that kind of year for Brady Cook.
I want to go back to one thing, Jack, before we get into these other points about the game. Talking about having a kid who grew up a fan of your team. You think about another SEC program that had a similar thing with a quarterback who had a lot more stars to his name in Bo Nix, and it ended up not ending well for Bo Nix in Auburn. He turned into a Heisman guy at Oregon. So, I mean, he's going to be a Heisman finalist this year. Might not win it, but he's going to be there. But sometimes it's just that diamond in the rough. And one thing I'll throw out there about Brady Cook that some people might not know is that, he wasn't a Drinkwitz guy. That's not, Drinkwitz did not recruit him. But when Barry Odom was fired, Max Baker, our good friend of ours who worked at the Columbia Missourian, he reached out to Brady and said, are you going to think about another school? He's like, I'm not coming to the school just because I'm not going to switch because of coaching changes. I want to go to Mizzou. I want to be a Tiger. I want to be the starting quarterback there. That was the mindset he had. And I'll always remember that, Max telling me that he reached out and got that from him about, no matter who was the coach, he was going to be there.
Yeah, that's a good point. And Nix is a good counter argument to what I said, where it did not work out for him at Auburn. Maybe shows a little bit about that program and what they do, but very different circumstance. Agree to agree. But yeah, and that does go under the radar. He was not a Drinkwitz recruit, but it was a spectacular performance for the guy. And you're not going to find someone else, another quarterback who's more bought into his program and wants to win for his team than Brady Cook. I don't think that's an exaggeration. I mean, the guy is he wants this team to reach the heights that all the fans do. And he's one of the fans that grew up wanting this team to have success. And now he's the one giving it to him. Let's go to the man on the ground, Mr. Cody Schrader, because gentlemen, I have a stat. I'm sure you guys heard this. First player in Mizzou history now to have 4 straight games of 100+ rushing yards. He finished with 148 and a touchdown on 23 carries. Did most of that damage in the first half as well, Peyton and Kenny. But Schrader, I mean, once again, who would have thought, I've said this out loud too. I remember this with Tyler Beatty, where when he left, everyone was like, we're going to miss Tyler Beatty. We miss Tyler Beatty. I'm at that same point with Cody Schrader. It's going to be a tough watching this running game. Once again, in our tenure at Mizzou from 2019 to 2022, we saw Larry Roundtree, we saw Beatty, and have to go through those regime changes. They're going to have to go through another one after Cody Schrader's gone, because my goodness, what another just great story. D2 thing we won't get into again. But just another spectacular game from the kid.
Yeah, no, he did pretty much all of his damage in the first half just because, the game got so crazy that second half. Florida was just ripping off big plays. Just things had to change up. But no, he was excellent again, 148 yards, touchdown, that big 40-yard touchdown that when Mizzou was kind of playing, he kind of, as he's done a lot of the time this season, whenever there's a lull, it feels like Cody Schrader can rip off a big run, get Mizzou kind of back into it. The rushing game in general was, for the most part, good. It wasn't their best effort of the year. The O-line had a little bit of trouble in pass pro and run blocking. It wasn't a terrible day, but Cody Schrader made the most of it in the first half. What's also interesting, Nate Pete got a couple touches in this game. I don't know if that's just a senior night thing or what, but he made the most of them. His first carry, he's kind of had moments where he's been just kind of a little too cautious, but he hit the hole hard there. Got a nice run there. Hopefully they can work him in a little more, but overall, good night for him.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a little bit stat breakdown of where that looked like for Pete. He had 2 carries, 18 total yards, and that long was for 16. That's great to see for a guy who's, Columbia's home. People forget he is a Rockbridge guy. He did transfer from Stanford, but he's from here. Kind of unfortunate what happened last year and where it put his season. You guys hit it on the head about, what Schrader did in this game, but talking with Brandon in that preview, he gave him some positions to look at and tell us what position groups Mizzou should address in the portal. We talked about running back with him. I wouldn't count out Jamal Roberts and Tavares Jones next year. You just hear so much about those guys, and they barely played at all in SEC play. And we've heard about Tavares Jones since last year. They call him T-Man. He works hard. We've barely even seen him on the field, but those two guys are on the depth chart. But when you have a guy like Cody Schrader working so well, you're not really going to turn to anyone else. And you look at last season, and coming into last season, Cody was 7th on the depth chart. I mean, there wasn't as much depth like as last year there's not as much depth this season for the Tigers. But when you have Cody Schrader working like that, it doesn't really matter. And I wanted to kind of go back and look at that, the first drive, because the run game was working so well. And then you kind of turned in some passing. And we talked about Brady Cook did not have the best start to this game through the air. I'm not the biggest, football mind, and I'm not going to know everything that's going on in the field and understand, all the breakdowns, schemes and all this stuff. But I thought, a lot of play action really could have played well for the Tigers early on, because Florida could not stop anything on the ground, make them bite for another run on Cody Schrader and find someone open. And it didn't work out in the end. It ended up with a field goal, but Cody was just explosive on the ground to start, really got the offense. I mean, that was the whole offense in most of the first half.
I'm not going to doubt what you say about being able to change in regime to whether it's Jones or somebody else, because they've been able to do it, from Roundtree to Beatty, had a little bit of a, hiccup in between, and now of Schrader. So I have no doubt they can get another guy ready once he's out the door, but we're not quite there yet. And I agree on like some of those play action things, like, not to get too nitpicky, but those actions were working. I mean, they talked all night about how young this Florida secondary was, how inexperienced this defense was with injuries and stuff. And they forced them at times, they made guys make choices. And, I'll go to that next, because we saw the Theo Wease touchdown. That's the best example of it, where you have Brady Cook rolling out to his right, Theo Wease just doing like a little, whether it's a hitch route or whatever. And the corner had to make a choice, and he chose to sprint at Brady, checked it down, and wheezes off to the races because he had so much space to work in. And that also, we mentioned the playmakers on this team. Theo Wease did nothing in this game until that play, and then ripped off that 77-yard touchdown. I mean, it's just nice to have these playmakers too. And we'll get to Brett Norfleet in a second, but I think you're right with Wease and some of those actions. Like this offense figured it out when it got down to it.
Just the last thing on Jones and Robert. I mean, we haven't seen either of them take a snap this year, so I still would expect Mizzou to kind of hit the portal for a running back, just because there's no real experience there. But the thing about that Wease play, it really did kind of follow like the flashpoint, it felt like, where Max Brown, Florida's backup, just fumbles the exchange, and Christian Williams falls on it. They needed that bad. And like I said earlier, with Cody Schrader normally being the guy that kind of sparks a Mizzou lull with just a big run, that didn't happen in the second half. It had to be somebody else, and this was the play that kind of had it happen. The route was, I think, just get Theo Wease kind of in the flat, be like a check down option. It was very clearly not Brady's first read. I don't know. That's a teaching moment for that corner. I have no idea why he abandoned Theo Wease like that, because they had no backside contain whatsoever. And I want to highlight two other players on that. Obviously, Theo Wease deserves all the credit for being able to tiptoe down the sidelines. But the blocks from Luther Burden and Mookie Cooper. I believe it. Jeremy Macklin tweeted about the blocks those two had, because they were just pitch perfect, and that's not something you'd expect from Mookie Cooper, who's a smaller guy, smaller slot receiver, and Luther Burden, who does not make his living blocking. It was really good to see those two be able to get their hands dirty and clear the way for Theo Wease. But like you said, Knowlton, that's just part of maybe the best thing Drink and Peeler have done in their time here, is just over time slowly build up that receiver core, because it felt like everyone not named Marquise Johnson, who's made a play for Mizzou, made a play in that fourth quarter. I mean, Wease had that touchdown. Miller had that huge catch on the last drive. Mookie had that last big catch on that last drive. Luther Burden, I mean, come on. He's back healthy, and he looks every bit of it. Yeah, you're pretty much dead on with the Theo Wease thing. I mean, he stepped up when they needed it.
Another big play that really comes to mind that, in my opinion, was a little bit underrated. And Peyton, I know you have an opinion about it. In the second quarter, there was a run play. You look at the start of the drive. Cody Schrader runs for 3 yards. Next play, Brady throws a deep pass that's incompleted to Luther Burden. Next play, Brady calls a good audible, and I thought this worked out well. Go into the I formation, and it was a read option to the right. And I know that you said there was no reason for that play to
There's
even work.
no way that should have worked.
And Cody turns it into 34 yards on 3rd and 7. And that was one of the biggest plays. I know the drive ended with the field goal, but at the same time, that was just a smart play to almost call that. And I mean, they did jam you on that left side, but Cody found the sideline and got 30 plus yards. And I think that was a play that, in my opinion, was a little bit underrated.
I mean, credit to the execution on that play because everybody blocked perfectly. Brady really sold that he was just going to keep it, and then he flipped it out at the last possible moment. 3rd and 7 speed options to the short side of the field, I could do a little bit without. Can't argue the results, I guess, but it was like a very last second audible. I remember like Brady frantically called it out because the play clock was ticking down. So if he likes what he sees, why not check out of it?
Yeah. There were a lot of little moments, and I think it's funny because I think, if this game doesn't go Mizzou's way, we're maybe talking about those in a little bit of a different light. But yeah, it's just a credit to Kirby Moore and what he's been able to do with this offense. They're able to get creative, and then you have guys like you mentioned the blocks downfield on that Wease touchdown. They're playing their tails off. Those are plays that a team that's bought in, that a team that that wants to make winning plays, that knows what they need to do to make winning plays. That's what they do. They put in that extra work. Like you said, that's not Luther Burden's MO. He's a receiver. And let's go to him because, I mean, you guys can touch on this pretty briefly. We can talk Luther Burden to death, as I'm sure we will for the rest of this season and all next year, thankfully, because he can't leave yet. 158 yards, 9 catches, 113 yards after the catch. Didn't have a touchdown, but I mean, it's just that once again, it's the same old statement. It's freaking nice to have Luther Burden. I mean, making plays after the catch, turning what should be a loss of 2 into a gain of 7. And yeah, making big plays for his teammates, chomping Gator sitting on the ground after the game's over, putting a little bit of swag, a little bit of, cockiness into this team. It's just so electric to have the guy and just what a playmaker.
5 stars do not come around at Mizzou too often. And boy, does it feel nice for the one they did get to absolutely hit like Luther Burden has. It's very apparent from the opening little pop pass they did that went for 7 yards to Luther. I was like, okay, he looks way healthier than even last week. I mean, that the first catch he had like on a real route downfield, I mean, he made a guy miss. I was like, this is the old Luther. Brady Cook had a good quote about his health after the game. This comes from our friend Wendell Shepard of Como Sports. Brady Cook on a resurgent night for Luther Burden. Quote, he's getting healthier, and you can see that on the field. He's confident, Luther is back making plays. He's him for sure. Sums it up perfectly. I mean,
He's him.
that 4th and 18, I mean, can you imagine if Mizzou did not have Luther Burden for a play like that? I mean, it was the commentators, I thought, put it perfect. I mean, he didn't even run full speed. He just realized there was going to be a pocket of grass there. Let me kind of jog to the end there. And Brady Cook made a good throw, and Luther Burden
Made a play.
Mm-hmm.
My favorite part about Luther's day is the breakdown of his receiving yards. He had 21 receiving yards in the first half, and he finished the game with over 150. And one of the plays that really just stood out to me about who Luther is you look at this one catch in the second quarter with 9 minutes. It's 3rd and 13, short pass to Luther Burden on the right side of the field. He advances it for 11 yards. I mean, you saw it. He fought for it. And it looked like, when Luther gets that ball, it's like, okay, he's going to find a way to push himself through. There were 3 Florida Gators draped on him, and they took him down. But that's the strength that Luther plays with. And we've talked about that at length as well, that, even if there's 3 guys in front of him, he's going to find a way to get through it. And you'll always think about that one, his first career game in college football against Louisiana Tech, where he just showed it to you early that just because there's someone in front of him, that person's just going to fall on their back. Like he's going to run through him. And that was a play that really stood out to me, especially early on when they did end up punting because it was 4th and 2, but it just really defined who Luther was to almost get you the first down.
Yeah, I mean, you can't say enough. You can't say enough. He's a beast. He does everything so well. He's a dog. He puts some swagger in the team, and then he gets to talk his talk after he walks his walk or chomp his chomp, I guess. As he did after this game. We do have to talk about our guy Brett Norfleet because we are going to get into some of the bad of this game because they didn't win this by 2, or they won this by 2 for a reason. We'll get to that, but let's talk about our guy briefly. Brett Norfleet, we almost had it. We did have it, and then we didn't have it. We had a Brett Norfleet touchdown. It was ripped away from us cruelly, but he still had an awesome game. 3 catches for 48 yards. He had 35 yards after the catch. He was making some plays. And Kenny, speaking of his yak, you have a good take. I'll go to you on this first. And we can talk about the negated touchdown too if we want. But you have a good take on kind of explaining just how Brett Norfleet moves physically and how that's kind of a good thing or maybe a good sign long term of just the kind of physical hoss that he's going to turn into.
Yeah, I mean, he is a freshman. We have to remember that. He's in the 18 to 19 range. Yeah, he is a hoss. Big dude already we know that coming in, he was 6'7", 6'8" when he joined the Tigers. And the way I kind of see it is like he's like a baby gazelle almost, or a young dog that doesn't realize how big he is. There's still a lot for him to grow, and he's still making these plays. And we've talked about it before, and we know that other outlets, Rock'em Nation, Jack's former beat writer for the Missouri basketball beat, Jaden Lewis, wrote a good article about, how much he does in the blocking game. And we talked about it as well. We had Max Chadwick on here who gave us some good numbers about how, he is a very good blocker. And once he, just gets like the more athleticism, and it comes with time. I mean, the guy still has everything at his disposal. He's going to really turn it up. And I think he's going to be like that tight end. He's going to be like the Alberto kind of question. Is like, is he going to be, this guy that's going to be a starter for 4 straight years that everyone's going to know his name?
Drinkwitz said after the game he would be very, very surprised if Norfleet is not all SEC freshman team. I don't know enough about the rest of the freshman tight ends in the SEC to make a informed judgment on that, but you have to like what you've seen. I remember after last season when Mizzou's tight end room was just a black hole. I mean, Kibet, Kipyater, Tyler Stevens. It was just no playmakers to be seen. I was like, I think Kenny and I had a conversation like we would not be surprised after watching some Brett Norfleet stuff. I'm like, oh my God, this dude's huge. Like he could play the most as a freshman, and that wound up happening. Have to be really happy with what you've seen from him out of the receiving game for the most part. Should have had the touchdown. That drive in general, I'm sure we'll touch on it. Really frustrating. Hurdled the dude, of course. I was really impressed with his run blocking in this game. There were more than a few times he just plowed dudes. There was a run that was out wide from Cody Schrader. He just blocked a Florida cornerback like 9 yards back and then into the dirt. I mean, he was just bullying a lot of guys. It's been a good freshman season for him. We'll see where it winds up going in the future.
Yeah. I mean, he's our guy. We're proud members of the Norfleet. I'm going to make a graphic so that others can proudly join the Norfleet. But yeah, we were bummed to have that touchdown taken away. I guess let's just touch quickly on that drive, just because it was weird. There were, I think, a couple penalties, and then we had Norfleet's touchdown, which was taken away because I believe it was Mekhi Miller lined up to where he was obscuring him. And that's what, then you can't do that because technically it's an ineligible man downfield. And then we had the Luther catch where Brady Cook, credit to him, is just trying to make a play, knows he needs to, fires one, a little bit of a risky throw into traffic, gets patted up in the air. Luther Burden caught it and then, of course, didn't catch it. It hit the ground. And I think, this was the moment for me, and you guys can give your take on this drive as well, where I thought it was going to be Mizzouing, because it wasn't necessarily anything that was, a BS call or this or that. It was just kind of unfortunate comedy of errors to prevent Mizzou from getting 6 points after they got in the end zone technically twice.
Yeah, that drive, and really just the red zone in general was frustrating because Mizzou
That's a
could
good
have won
segue
this
too.
game by a lot of points. But just as it has been a couple times, just not perfect in the red zone. The opening drive, even, I mean, they get goal to go and they wind up having to settle for a field goal. And that drive where 2 touchdowns get negated and both were correct calls. I mean, Norfleet was obscured. Luther did not catch that ball despite his best efforts. Um, but I agree with you, Knowlton. I was like, oh my God, they're going to lose this game. And that drive is going to be what shows up in my nightmares because they just couldn't finish. Kirby Moore has done an incredible job this season. Really hope they can hold on to him going forward. Please lose the goal to go QB draw. It does not work. You can't. It's too condensed. There's too many guys in the box. He calls it like every game. Every game has a goal to go QB draw. It has not resulted in a touchdown once. I mean, his Cook's touchdown run today was like if Cody Schrader did not block 2 dudes on his own, that's a 3-yard loss. Um, Overall, it didn't doom them, and they still have plenty of time to fix it. And it's not the end of the world that you're not getting touchdowns every red zone possession, but I'd like to see it a little bit more success in that department.
Blocking 2 dudes on his own, Schrader there, and I mean, he came up a little bit hobbling as well because Brett Norfleet even like called for. He's like, my bad, my bad. You know, I think he probably should have shifted over and was taking one of those guys. But Brady Cook falls on his legs too. I mean, Cody gets up, and that's just the guy he is. You know, the hustle and the heart and hustle kind of guy. But I think Kirby Moore's reaction, you know, said it all for us as well. You guys were a couple minutes ahead of me and texting about the game. I did not know it was an incomplete pass yet because when they showed Kirby Moore on TV, he's looking up at like a TV to his side and he's like, what did I just see? Like, there's no way he caught that, right? And so it was kind of like that. And I like, you know, thinking about it was not like Mizzouing in my eyes. It was just like nothing was really falling your way. Like nothing like referees or another team was just doing wrong. It was just small little things. You're shooting yourself in the foot or just almost makes a spectacular play and it didn't come true. And at the end of the game, it did kind of feel like, oh, you know, we're finally, you know, coming back down to earth, resetting at once Florida makes that kick. And the one thing I will say about that Florida kick first is that the Florida kicker's last name is Smack. And that could have been awesome.
Trey Smack.
Trey Smack.
That's an electric name.
Smacks the upright like that.
Yeah,
that would have gone
the same
crazy
thing.
if he ever misses one. I mean, you'd be in some bad water if he ever misses.
He's in a good. He has a good basketball name because you have Smack, which is like, you know, sometimes like a dunk. You smack
or a baseball,
and he's
name.
got Trey. Oh, or baseball, yeah, you know. But he's a good kicker. He had good range. He made his kicks, but yeah, it was just a little weird. And then I'll lump this in here too because again, you know, I don't know. I guess I can get your guys taking the offense in general. I mean, there were a few mistakes. There were some penalties. And then the biggest one, of course, which we should touch on is Cody Schrader would have had some more rushing yards and another key play on a 3rd down if it weren't for a poor Connor Tollison snap. Negated that because Brady Cook had to kneel down to pick up the ball, which you really can't blame Brady Cook for. Like, it's hard to remember that when you're like, oh my God, there's a football on the ground. I need to pick it up and not have it be on the ground anymore. It was bad snap by Tollison, but I guess, yeah, quick take on that play and the offensive line in general.
It's not excusable. It really is beyond ridiculous at this point that this is an issue in week what? What are we in? This is 11 games
10?
now.
11?
And it feels like every single game we've had a bad snap. It's really, really stupid. And that's twice where it really, really screwed Mizzou. The first time was obviously the worst in that LSU game. That like you see why they really were trying to not have Connor Tollison be their center. He has improved immensely in the blocking department. He has been much better at that point. I still think you can contend he's their worst offensive lineman because he can't snap, which is kind of a big deal if you're a center. And I don't know how this is an issue still. Like, Brandon Jones has done a fantastic job with that O-line, especially coming in super late in the offseason. can't say enough because still largely the O-line has been a positive. It has been much better. That needs to be something. If Connor Thompson is going to be your center next year, you cannot have these issues. It is ridiculous. This is a Power 5 center playing in the best league in college football that has struggled to snap pretty much every game. And Brady Cook, I don't even remember the game, but he screamed at Connor Thompson after one of them because it was just like beyond ridiculous. And I would like to see him do it again because it's going to cost Mizzou big time.
There was some good points about, coming from the broadcast about the rest of the offensive line play. That there was, they were giving Brady a good amount of time to go through his progressions, and the penalties were really limited as well. There was only one holding call, and it was against Javon Foster, and then one false start. You kind of remember in the fourth quarter there, right at the start on Armand Membu.
It was the last drive Membu had one.
Yeah, and I mean that's something you think about too. Is that we haven't heard Armand Membu get a flag in a long time. And the one thing that stood out to me that the broadcast pointed out that Xavier Delgado has not been penalized in the last 2 seasons, which I felt was ridiculous.
Wow,
that didn't seem correct. That didn't seem correct to me.
And yeah, I didn't. When I was on that beat, I always asked for Xavier Delgado because I just want to hear him. I mean, the guy, you never hear much about him. He's played some sneaky good offensive line this season.
I feel like it's good if you don't hear
a graduate. Yeah. And they talked about how he's been a vocal leader on that offensive line. I haven't heard anything about it. And I know he talked once earlier in the season, but it seems like Xavier Delgado is having a great year, and a lot of people are really respecting it on that Missouri side.
I was surprised coming into the year that he was even still a starter, I remember. I did not know that. But, I mean, largely the O-line was solid tonight. It was far and away its worst game in probably a month just because in the first half they were struggling to keep Brady clean. But yeah, like you said, Delgado, I almost wonder, I'm not a scout, but I almost wonder, like, he has to have some sort of buzz in the draft because it's not just the lack of penalties. He's been very good. That left side of the O-line has been very good. Obviously, Javon Foster will be a draft pick. Cameron Johnson, I think, does need a little shine just because he's really cleaned up his penalties. I think he only has one in the last 4 weeks. Something very low after just being a penalty machine earlier in the year. And he's been moving people, especially in the run game. And Membu is just a freak. I mean, he had a few snaps today where he kind of got beat. I remember when Mizzou punted the ball back to Florida, and Florida kicked the go-ahead field goal towards the end. Membu got straight beat on 2nd and 6, and it wound up being a loss of 1. But largely, I mean, he's still just a true sophomore. O-line's been just so much more improved. Just gotta please snap the ball correctly.
Yeah, I think that's really the take you can take away. It's like it's hard to nitpick because it has been definitely much improved. Let's go to the other side of the ball now, where I think the real problems lie or lied. I don't know. Were in this game because. So I had a friend text me who is not a huge football. He likes football, but he was like, "Wow, what a win! I didn't watch any of the games, and he didn't go to Mizzou, but he was like, I didn't watch any of the game, but I watched the final drive. What happened earlier?" And the way I described to him was, imagine if you were watching your favorite football team play a game with no linebackers on defense, because that's how it felt. It went to me. I would like to know from you guys first of all. I think like it's hard because they didn't have Tyron Hopper. Chuck Hicks and Tristan Newson were actually Mizzou's leading tacklers in this game. They both had 9 apiece. But my goodness, I mean, it started at the beginning with the 61-yard Ricky Pearsall touchdown from Mertz. Trevor Etienne looked like Travis out there from time to time. And just incorrect reads, stuff not going well. Kenny, I'll go to you first. Is that an accurate description? Because that's what it felt like to me. There was just no linebackers in this game.
I think it just really shows you how much Tyron Hopper matters. And that's where I kind of started, is that we know he's a quiet guy. When he talks to the media, talks to people, it doesn't really have much to say, but we've heard before, he is a vocal leader on that defense. And just without him, I think that the linebackers were lost. I mean, it's hard to have 2 guys starting. When you start the year, your 2 linebackers are your captains on defense. And then now you have 2 guys that weren't seeing a lot of playing time. And Tristan Newsom was a transfer first time in the system. Chuck Hicks, who missed all of last season, into a starting role now. And it's been pretty brutal. It was, I mean, a brutal day for the linebackers there. You look at the box score and you're like, oh, well, they totaled up a lot of tackles. Tristan Newsom led the team in tackles. It's still a lot of missed plays. And I think it just comes down to show you how much Tyron Hopper matters on that defense. And we talked about up and down season for Tyron Hopper. He's struggled tackling. He's had some bright spots. I mean, it wasn't the exact season that a lot of us were expecting, but it just shows you how much he matters to this defense. And that's really where I come with it.
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it. I mean, Hopper has his own issues sometimes. I mean, the missed tackles earlier in the season were pretty bad, but good God. I mean, Chuck Hicks is going to – I mean, he had a bury the tape bad day. I mean, he was just – when he got – I mean, it wound up breaking Graham Mertz's collarbone or something like that anyways, but when he got bowled over by Graham Mertz, Chuck Hicks, I was like, Jesus, man, you're a middle linebacker. That cannot happen. Newsom wasn't great either, although I didn't not notice him getting beat as much as Hicks. The first touchdown throw, Hicks got beat on that. I mean, it was just rough day for Chuck Hicks. They needed Tyron Hopper out there. I mean, they got away with it last week. Newsom actually played great against Tennessee, I thought. Gonna need Tyron Hopper back as soon as possible. And it is a little concerning, honestly, for next year because Hopper's gone. Newsom and Hicks are your likely starters. I know Damian Wilson is floating around in that mix too, but that might be something you need to go grab an experienced vet from somewhere because it was pretty bad tonight. It wasn't all them. I'll point that out. A lot of missed tackles. Darius Robinson, I love him to death. He had some missed tackles tonight.
You mean Darius Mizzou?
Yes, Darius Mizzou. We'll touch on that. But he had some missed tackles. It was just a lot of people had games they were going to want to forget. Dalen Carnell had a game he'll want to forget. Ennis I thought honestly had his worst game of the year, and it still wasn't even that bad. But ultimately, I come out of that game not overly concerned with the defense, just because we have to remember Florida is a very, very good offense. They can run. ETN is a very good running back. They were just the better unit tonight.
I'm glad you brought up Damian Wilson as well, because he's a guy who stepped into a starting role last year when injuries hit the linebacking core, and he got jumped. Yeah, and he got jumped on the depth chart by two guys. One guy came back from injury, and I said another guy came into from the portal. And it's kind of interesting to me what happens, what DJ Smith is kind of looking at, the co-defensive coordinator. He's also a linebackers coach. What he's thinking about this week. I think down the line as well. Someone had brought up earlier, maybe last summer, and he's not going to make an immediate impact this year or even next year, likely. But Brayshawn Littlejohn is still a guy that I'm pretty high on. I think he's going to be in that Chad Bailey conversation of being that middle linebacker who's one of those leaders on defense. And that was just from minimal conversation with the kid. He had the energy of a guy who was a junior in college probably, and he was a senior in high school. He just, he wanted to be that guy. He wanted to be a captain. I think that's a guy you look down the road at. I mean, I like your idea that, that's a portal thought as well, but I wouldn't count out Brayshawn Littlejohn next year. But for right now, I wonder how much DJ Smith is going to maybe look at Damian Wilson in practice this week and see how he can kind of mix into that group after kind of just a rough linebacking group this week.
I think he wants to figure out how he can perform some sort of medical miracle to get Tyron Hopper back out there as quick as he can. That's just what you need. I agree. I think this was just a game that showed how much they needed his leadership. And Payton's right, though. It wasn't all bad. You had guys making Graham Mertz uncomfortable. He injured himself, and obviously, we don't root for injuries. And we thought it seemed like it did change the game, though. I mean, obviously, when a quarterback goes down, your starter goes down. They bring in, I believe, is a freshman or a sophomore.
Redshirt freshman.
Is a redshirt freshman. Their backup Max Brown, and yeah, you have that strike to Wease. You have him fumble, which Payton said, Mizzou sorely needed that because Brown was driving. I think the commentators made a really good point about him actually with his running ability. It almost seemed to open up the playbook a little bit for Florida, and Mizzou really couldn't do anything about it with the way ETN was running too. So they got the break. They have the Wease strike. It seems like it's changing the game, and that guy just works his way back into it. But I think you have to give the defense some credit in terms of their grit. You had Darius Robinson, Johnny Walker, who didn't get ejected for that almost targeting play on Johnson or Brown. I didn't mean to say Johnson. I'm thinking Max Johnson, your guy at A&M, Kenny. But yeah, I think you do overall have to give him a lot of credit. And his slipping on that first touchdown by Pearsall is unfortunate.
Wasn't a
But
touchdown,
you do have to
yes.
keep. Or sorry, yeah, the deep strike, and then they go down and punch it in. But yeah, overall, I think some concerns with just the big chunk plays, but stepped up when they needed to. And Darius Robinson still manages to have, or Darius Mizzou manages to have great nights somehow every day.
And I'll give Max Brown a little credit as well. I mean, he was a redshirt freshman who stepped into a road environment against the number 9 team in the nation, and he stepped up. I mean,
they might have
other than that fumble, I mean, he was great, I thought, honestly. I mean, he got sacked by Darius Mizzou, made it a 3rd and long. That was a crazy call with 11 minutes left in the 4th quarter. You're down 9, going for it on 4th and 4, and Brown delivered a strike. I mean, it was one of like 3 or 4 throws. I don't even remember the number of attempts he had. But where he really gashed Mizzou, I mean, those read options. That read option 27-yard run on that 3rd and 1. I thought that game was over. But hey, Mizzou made a play. Ultimately, and really it was just one bad half. They played well in the first half. They played horrible in the second half, and it was still enough to get a win. Just regroup, get ready to go against a bad Arkansas team.
Billy Napier is so weird too. If I could, a brief sidebar, like the 4th and 4 is a ballsy call, and he got that one, but then he calls like a sweep when they had it on 3rd down, and they forced ETN out of bounds, and that gave Mizzou a timeout. Again, Drink used it on when
that was ETN's fault.
You think? I guess he got kind of pushed out of bounds, but
I think Billy Napier definitely would have told them, or just thought they would have known that, like, don't go out of bounds.
Okay, fair enough.
What were you going to say?
I still thought, yeah.
Well, I didn't have anything to say about Billy Napier. I just wanted to say kind of the focus for the Mizzou defense going into this next week is, and just the practice this week is limiting those explosive plays. I'm glad you brought that up, because you look at some of the big chunks, and that's something that was the emphasis for all of last year. Going into each week, it's like, we want to bring chaos and we want to limit explosion. And 26, 30, 27, 39, those were some of the longest rushes through the air. 27, 61, 38, 37, just huge plays. That's just uncharacteristic of this Mizzou defense in the last year and a half. And especially on the ground too. We talked about, Florida has 2 running backs that were coming into this game as some of them top 10 in the SEC, 82 on the ground for ETN, and then 85 on the ground for Johnson. And when you kind of look at next week too, I'm just going to peeking ahead just at what Arkansas can do. KJ Jefferson can still run. I know he's been through it, and I mean, not been his year, not the year he wanted, but he still put 90 yards on the ground. And I mean, that's a number that's affected by sacks too. I don't know how many times FIU actually got to him in this game, but I mean, Rocket Sanders isn't the guy you're going to worry about anymore. It's Isaiah Augusteve, and Arkansas, I mean, they still have a run game that can put up 100 yards. Of course, it was against FIU, but you just need to get that back on track for this next week.
And one benefit, this one quick thing on Arkansas, their O-line has just been absolutely terrible this year. So hopefully you get Hopper back. I don't think it should matter too much. Arkansas is a prime bounce back candidate. Yes, you're on the road. It'll be KJ Jefferson's last game, which I do think is an interesting thing to throw in there. His first start ever against Mizzou, last start ever coming against Mizzou. But that is a game you should dominate, just by virtue of Arkansas's O-line has just been a mess this year.
Well, Florida's O-line was banged up, and I mean, they were getting
but it
the
is
quarterback.
Better,
yeah, it is. It is still slightly better, but I mean, it's still. I think it's a valid point. KJ Jefferson's a big dude that he draws concerns from every coach in the SEC just because of his physical tools. So that is something to keep an eye on.
And Drinkwood said at the end of last season, he gave him a hug at the end. He knew KJ well. He was like, "I hope you're not coming back, man. Like, I do not want to face you again." KJ comes back, and he's still a threat back there. And I talked about this last week. I think Mizzou's done a good job this season of not looking ahead, taking it week by week. The 1-0 mentality, STP, all this stuff. And even though that they probably weren't looking ahead at Arkansas, looking ahead at about a possible bowl game, it's still a good wake up call to get you back on track. Clean up the sloppy plays, clean up the mistakes on defense. Reads from the linebackers. What the defensive ends are doing, and I think this is a good wake up call. Even with a win, even with how you went out on that, you're still going to look back
definitely.
and this was not a success in a lot of areas, and you have an opportunity to go against Arkansas. Make a statement. That's a rivalry game. It's a trophy game. It matters a lot to these guys. Go out there with a win and get yourself ready for hopefully what they are hoping for is a BCS bowl.
Yeah. I did. I've always had the take that sometimes the most dangerous team you can play is a team playing for nothing because they just lay it all on the line and they don't care. They'll just throw everything at the wall, especially if it's his last start. I wasn't even thinking about that. Quick notes on special teams. We have the main one, which I'll get to last. But Mevis did all the kickoffs. He had no problems. We saw Blake Craig do it a couple times last week.
Much better.
Yeah, that was good. Marquise Johnson didn't rip off a big play on as a receiver, but he did have a decent kick return. I think it was his first one, where he got out past the 30, showed off
his
that
only
speed
one
a little bit. That was his only one. So that was good to see. Maybe some potential there. And then we had Luther Burden and Chris Abrams-Drain switching on punts, which is better, I think, in our eyes.
I didn't
But
even
the
notice
main one, yeah. I mean, they did no wrong, so that wasn't really an issue. The main thing, however, gentlemen, and what I thought was really going to lose this game and was pissing me off, quite frankly, as a kicker and punter guy, Riley Williams getting the start at punter. He was really bad. I don't know how you can really say it otherwise. He was really bad. He had 4 punts for 165 yards, and that's being real generous because they were all wobblers, and so he got some nice bounces that rolled Mizzou's way. But the standout one was the final one where they gave Florida the ball back with about 4 minutes to go, essentially at midfield.
At the 40. Yeah.
Yeah, it was really, really shocking, and another moment where I felt, this is what's going to lose the game for Mizzou. And I'll let you guys go into it. Like, Luke Bauer isn't spectacular. He's obviously the hero for what he did against Kentucky, but I could have made some of the punts Riley Williams made tonight.
I just don't like the quote after the game from Drink was that we thought for a second this was a decision made because he was a senior and it was senior day. And if that ever was a call, that would have been bad, just bad.
Unforgivable.
But yeah, really bad. But the reasoning Drink gave in the press conference was that they made the decision based off of what happened in practice this week, and that he thought he punted well until the last one, which is just wrong. I don't really know why they were so jumpy. I thought Luke Bauer had honestly been improving punting wise. Not even obviously everyone's gonna love him for the throw against Kentucky, but even as just a punter, he was getting better every week. This felt like a herky jerk reaction. I think they'll go back to Bauer next week because boy, oh boy, Riley Williams was horrible. And it's the second year in a row they got the punter competition wrong because Riley Williams was the week 1 starter. Last season, they started the kickoff guy, as the week 1 punter, and both of them had to be switched because they were just so horrible.
Moment.
I'm not a part of the Stonehouse family, but I've learned a lot just talking with Jack Stonehouse and his cousin who's now with the Titans, and they walked me through so much of the mechanics. And just, watching punters as well, they're always so fluid and everything looks good. Riley Williams just looked out of sync today, too. It just, nothing really looked like he was leaving his foot correctly. A couple knuckleballs. The stats don't do punters justice either. You really have to look at every kick and the circumstances of what's going on as well. If you look at Luke Bauer, of course, I mean, he did, I think it was against Kentucky where he had it was a bad snap or a drop, and he did get
That was
tackled.
South Carolina.
Or South Carolina, excuse me. And so you look at those games following it, his average dropped a little bit, dropped below 40 in the last two, but you got to look more into those. I don't think that really affect. And the broadcast said something similar or something along the lines of like he's starting on senior night, kind of made you think, oh, did they start him because this is his last home game of college? It's Riley Williams' only first year with the Tigers. And I mean, it feels a lot similar to what happened with Stonehouse and Ketting last year. And Stonehouse ended up finishing the full year. Bauer just gets sat down for one game. He was still doing the holds on field goals, so he was available. And it's just kind of an interesting situation. And I agree with Peyton. They just kind of should go back to Luke.
Yeah, they botched it big time. But, Mizzou managed to overcome that. But, you don't want any of that in a bowl game, no matter which one you get. That's a problem. And it's just a problem with Link going forward. We've expressed our thoughts for the entire season on Eric Link. We'll continue to do it probably as long as he's employed on the side or on the coaching staff of Mizzou.
It's something every week with that unit. It really is. We have to talk about it every week if something goes wrong. And
it's something weird.
So
whether it's returning kicks when they shouldn't, punting choices.
Early in the season, every single game had a horrible kick.
Yeah.
I mean,
Credit to Mevis though. I mean, he made all his kicks.
Excellent.
He's been great. He's been great.
And I talked with Peyton about that because we have some friends who are still just ripping Mevis. What confidence do you not have in the guy anymore? He did have an up and down year last year. I mean, you think about the Auburn game, but I think after Kansas State, he's been really good. He struggled at the beginning of the season. He missed, I think, his first PAT ever. Comes out. Yes. I mean, he's been electric. I mean, lights out since. One of the best kickers in the SEC all time. It's undisputed. I mean,
the guy's leading Mizzou score.
Exactly.
Yep. He's good.
It's just weird that there's still some people that doubt him.
Yeah. Stop hating on Mevis and Brady Cook. Other things before the game, we've been calling him Darius Mizzou. We're gonna miss Darius Robinson. He had the Mizzou on the back of his jersey instead of his last name, which is pretty cool. It made me wonder what extent you can put things that aren't your own last name on the back of jerseys. You know how like with the Colorado players, they're putting like their Twitter handles. I wonder how you can get that greenlit. I hope to God Mizzou never does that, but I don't know. Like if someone has a cool nickname, you put it on the back of your jersey. But good for Darius. I mean, he's going out. It was his last home game. And then the other thing, we mentioned Napier being weird. Mizzou shoots itself in the foot sometimes. Florida shot itself in the foot a lot tonight, which we should touch on. Kenny graciously wrote down all the notes for me. Their offensive line, weird game clock stuff. They had 4 false starts, 1 delay of game, and then they had 2 timeouts to avoid the delay of game. One of them, I remember, it was Napier absolutely ripping into the backup. Like it was just kind of funny. Like I felt very bad for him because it's like, hey, chill out, Billy. Like, you're putting Max Brown in a road environment. It's going to be tough. But it ended up hurting Florida a bit because they had to burn timeouts and they had some not good offensive line moments themselves. Nice to see that with another team for once.
Yep. First, just going back to Darius Robinson, he had a quote about his jersey. He said, "That was very important to me." This is from Wendell Shepard, by the way. I thought the best way to honor all of the quote, or in parentheses, all of the coaches and staff, past and present, was by having Mizzou on the back. I'm going to miss Darius Robinson a lot. I think he is going to be the hardest player to replace this offseason. It's just really, really. Blake Baker said in a quote last year, if Darius Robinson comes back to Mizzou next year, he will be a first-round pick. And it didn't look like Darius Robinson was going to do that for a bit, but he did. I don't know if he'll be exactly in the first, but he certainly has made himself some money this season. And on the Napier thing, just a weird coach. I mean, his nickname for a lot of people is Sunbelt Billy. And he had some of those weird moments. I mean, when they called the timeout at the end of the first half near midfield and handed off, what are you doing?
Yeah. They ran out of timeouts and then they ran it and didn't even try and clock it or throw a Hail Mary. That felt like loser talk a bit. You can't do that on the road.
They couldn't clock it because it was 4th down by then. throw an out route.
Yeah, just
Throw
yeah,
something else. Give yourself a chance with the Hail Mary.
yeah. It's
He
bad
coached
bad choice on the
scared,
road.
and if they had gotten 3 points there, they would have won tonight.
It's a good point. Good point. But they didn't. Oh well.
Nope.
We're super sad about it.
Yeah. Chomp.
Go to the YouTube. The last final thing I have, and I know Kenny has something to add here. This is nothing. We're done talking about the game with the Mizzou standpoint at this point. I'm just gonna kind of rant because I'm a big broadcast guy. So I care about who's calling the game. I don't like watching football muted. It's boring. So I care about the commentators. I don't like Joe Tessitore. I'm not a Joe Tessitore guy. I think someone also said that him and Jesse Palmer are kind of a cursed Mizzou duo. I think they commentate a lot when Mizzou loses on the ESPN night games. Not a fan. I don't know. He's talking about Formula One in the middle of the thing. And I'm like, I don't care who you were with at the boxing match, Joe. I don't know. Maybe I'm just being a little bit personal. It's just something about him. I just had a little bit of beef with Mr. Tessitore. Kenny?
Yeah, I know some people get frustrated with just the repeating of storylines each week and nothing's really changing. It's just, Cody Schrader, a lot of history behind him, and he's come a long way. And that's the conversation each week. And it's going to be like the same story repeated and repeated. We sometimes have to remember that these broadcasts aren't directed to people who follow the Missouri Tigers. They're not directed to Florida Gator fans all the time, just directed to people who want to watch football. And it's like they're educating us on everything we've known for the last 2 seasons. And the one thing that just kind of, sometimes bothers me, and I don't know if, you can call me whatever you want when I say this, but it's like you need to support local journalism in that sense. These stories aren't new. I mean, you see some of these stories about Cody Schrader and Brady Cook. I mean, they've been coming out since last year, and I know there's a lot more eyes on the Tigers this year. Of course, there has to be. They're a top 10 team when they were projected to finish 6th in the SEC East, and there's a lot more to it. But it sometimes reminds me of like Bailey Zappi when he came in for the Patriots. Like, oh, we've never heard of this guy. There were millions, or not millions, hundreds.
He was like the
of
leading passer in college.
Yeah, in Western Kentucky history, and there's a lot to it. And that was one thing that's always stood out to me that people are posting, like, support local journalism. These stories are there, and they just get rewritten like it's nothing, like they've never been told before. That happens a lot in the last week. And if you just look back at last year, you can see these stories have been written. You look at the beginning of the season, these stories have been told. And I understand, it's TV, it's different, and these stories are just being told again. But I mean, the stories are there, and it's just support local journalism. That's all I have to say. And you can say whatever you want about me. It's not going to hurt my feelings.
Yeah, it's a weird way. I don't know how you can make some sort of cross because, like, you got to script those things in. You only have a limited amount of time. These broadcasters are national. They don't have that long to deep dive into everything. But yeah, I wish there was a way where they could be like, this comes from wherever, and this is what it's about. This is what the story's about. I don't know.
I'll tell you what, Kenny, you were firing from the hip there, huh?
Yeah. Well, you also just have to think about it. I said it last week. I was like, yeah, I mean, Cody Schrader was a D2 running back. Tell us why he has success in the SEC. It's not just he worked so hard for it. What is he doing well? I mean, there's so much more to it than that.
Peyton, I think you and I are going to say the same thing. I thought Palmer did a good job.
Yes, I was going. I think that they actually did. I'll give this broadcast some props on a couple things. For one, they actually talked about new storylines. I did notice, Brandon Jones's name was said on a broadcast.
Yeah, that was
the first time
good.
all season, and they totally went in depth. There were a few different times where they just illuminated some newer stories. Definitely did that better than the CBS crews did. I don't recall it could have happened. They got it out of the way quick, oh my god, he was running at Truman State 2 years ago, and isn't that awesome? And then 5 minutes in, they stopped talking about it because I think they knew. But I didn't really have a problem with the broadcast. I don't really listen to the broadcast. I'm in my own head when I'm watching these.
Palmer did all right describing how Cody Schrader plays. I will give him credit about the one cut, how he reads zones. He did a good job on that.
Part was good.
Beef I do have when he went they call him KAD around here. And I remember we got a text. I was like, who the fuck calls him that?
We go CAD, Jesse.
Yeah.
We say CAD.
I out loud go, actually we call him CAD, which is what KAD spells.
And
So, whatever.
I don't want people to think I have anything against these broadcasters. I'm actually one of like the biggest broadcast supporters ever. I'm not too harsh on a lot of people that do TV stuff because it's hard to be, not take one side, especially when you're on ESPN or a big, market like CBS, when you're trying to tell stories from both sides. And I love Palmer as well, and I think he did a great job in Tessitore as well. But I didn't really have any. Yeah, I didn't have anything against it. I was just, kind of saying that I don't know if it bothers other people. It's just the people I talk to. It's just like, oh, we keep repeating the same thing about went to Truman State, blah, blah, blah. It's just, there's a lot more to it. And I think, even talking to Curtis Looper, there's some good stories there about how Curtis Looper didn't know him
The
at all.
Bruce Feldman from The Athletic had a good feature about Cody Schrader. And yes, they dove into the D2 stuff. But he talked to Curtis Looper, and it honestly, like, there were some very good, like, factoids that I didn't know. Like, there was one story. I'm totally sorry. Please go read Bruce Feldman because I feel bad just telling this story, but that's behind a paywall. But it should be said. Cody Schrader, I believe it was between the Arkansas game and the Gasparilla Bowl. They had a practice at 3 p.m. Cody Schrader had to graduate at 2 p.m. And in there, Bruce Feldman said that Schrader was trying to just bail on the graduation. He wanted to practice. And they talked him into going to graduation. And then hours later, Cody Schrader asked Looper to send him the practice report so he could run through it. Apparently, Curtis Looper looked out and saw Cody Schrader running through the whole practice by himself. And he texted to the other 7 running backs that were once upon a time in front of him and was like, that's why Cody Schrader beat you out. Like, that's just there are original stories out there. You just have to look.
Well said. It's hard for us. We hear them all the time. They gotta do it for a national audience who just happens to be tuning in. But it is what it is. Kenny, do you have another thing on Mackay? Oh, and you tease our guest.
Yeah, I'm going to tease our guests a little bit for this upcoming week. It is an Arkansas game. There's a big, well, not big,
Holy
but
hog.
a guy really well that's from Arkansas. I played for Mizzou for 6 seasons. Third and this guy talked to Mackay Miller a lot, and we talked about it at length before. Mookie and Mackay just find ways to get open, and they make big catches when it matters, and they showed it on Saturday, and that's something that really stood out to me. The guest is Barrett Bannister. I'm just going to say it now. We'll have Barrett on this upcoming week, and he'll help us preview. He'll help us talk about it. We're going to get him to talk about Cody Schrader being a finalist at the Burlsworth Trophy, a trophy that meant a lot to Barrett Bannister, who ended up not winning it. But Cody is in the running for it now and likely going to take that award. Get him to talk a little bit about Mackay and what this rivalry means between these two programs.
Good tease. Yeah, we're having
By just saying it.
You just said it. Bad tease. You need to get better at marketing us, Kenny. I'm joking. But yeah, we'll have Barrett Bannister on. So everyone listen to that interview on Friday. But yeah, in the end, boys, win's a win. And a New Year's Six Bowl is still very much in the running. And now it's officially Arkansas week. So, we'll have a preview for that game. We'll talk to Barrett about it. Should be fun. And then, of course, we'll recap as we always do. And hopefully we're doing that by talking about what bowl games Mizzou are going to get. We'll probably do that. I'm sure, Peyton, I'll make you give a rundown later this week when everything shakes down, when the CFP comes out. It'll be interesting to see where they end up, as well as just CFP conversation in general. Jordan Travis getting hurt, all that stuff.
Mizzou is not making the CFP, just so everybody.
No, I know. I'm just saying, will they stay 9th? Maybe they'll put Louisville over them to beat Miami. I don't know. But we'll find out and we'll talk about it. So until that time, everyone go enjoy your week. Go celebrate the win. Have a fun and safe week. We'll be back or I guess we'll have a show for you guys on Monday, won't we? We'll recap the rest of the SEC.
We got a basketball game to talk about too.
Yeah, and oh my God, that was the other thing. Mizzou's just when did Mizzou get all of the luck?
Cardiac Tigers.
Yeah, Cardiac Tigers. So yeah, we'll talk about the Minnesota game. Believe you me, Peyton and I had a firsthand accounting of it. So plenty to dive into. But until then, everyone go enjoy the win. Have a fun and safe rest of your weekend. This is the Unwritten Rule presented by Bet Online. See you guys on Monday.